Hello and welcome to part 2 of the first week of lectures for ethical issues in computing and technology. In part 1 we did some introductory stuff. In part 2 here we're going to wrap up the introductory stuff and move on to chapter 4 in the Reynolds about privacy. So on page... Nope, no, I'm on the wrong one here. Okay, there we go. On page 26 of the BAS, she has section 1.4. What is ethics anyway? And in the first chapter, she makes an important point that I want to highlight. Sometimes we discuss issues and problems related to computer technology from a somewhat detached perspective. We see how a new technology can create new risks and how social and legal institutions continually adapt. But technology is not an immutable force outside of human control. People make decisions about what technologies and products to develop and how to use them. People make decisions about when a product is safe to release, and people make decisions about access to and use of personal information. We make laws and sets of rules and standards. A lot of times we think that once something is unleashed on the world, we can only observe. It's going to get bigger, it's going to do what it's going to do, and then we're going to have to deal with the fallout and the consequences. I see this around AI especially, concurrently in the world today. We talk about what's going to happen if a general artificial intelligence is created. And the thing is this is called technological determinism. That we're on a path and we have no way of altering it, changing it, or stopping it. But that's not true. As Bass says here, we have value systems and we can implement them. But when we want to be consistent and fair and just and believe in things that are well supported logically and evidentially, has lots of evidence, evidentially, that's what I was going to say, I'm not sure that's a word. How do we do that? There are lots of different answers from different motivations and perspectives. And that's where we get deontology, utilitarianism, natural rights, negative and positive rights, contributing to society, and social contracts / political justice. I'm just going to lecture not from the textbook this time. We'll talk about deontology first. This comes from an ancient Greek word, deontics, which means rules. No, duty, excuse me. Maybe I should lecture from the textbook. And what we know, ology is the study of, so deontology is the study of what we owe to one another. What is our duty as individual members of a society or a community or a business? And the person who is credited most often with inventing the study of deontology is Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher from the 1700s. And now we're thinking about motivations instead of consequences. So if I have an ethical dilemma in front of me, do I report my boss who wants me to ignore some dodgy numbers on our quarterly report? Or do I report them to somebody? A deontologist would think about what we owe to ourselves and other people in our company. The consequences we can't predict. We can only think about our motivations and our value systems. There's a bunch of different ways that we can formulate it, but one of, I think, the easiest to understand goes like this. It's supposed to be a universal rule that applies to everyone in all situations. Never treat another human being as a mere means to an end. We can add that in there. But always as an end in themselves. Now, what does that mean? If you've ever heard that some behavior is a means to an end, you already are halfway there. An end is a goal, and the means are the method you use to get to that goal. So you and I might have the same goal. Let's say we want to be wealthy in the next 10 years. But you study really hard, you figure out a job that's going to pay you well, you invest, you save, and I try to go and rob a bank. We both have the same goal, we have wildly different means. What does it mean to treat someone else as a goal? Well, Kant thought the thing that made us special and different, meaning human beings, is that we are rational. We're rational and we have freedom. We don't necessarily have freedom to do whatever we want in the physical world, but we have freedom of thought. And we could use that freedom of thought to come up with a system of behavior that is consistent and rational. That's what counts and respects human freedom to pursue their own goals. And that's what counts as morality. That rule that we give to ourselves that protects our freedom and the freedom of people around us. Let's get a concrete example. The idea is we can enter into contracts all we want. You and I are in a contract right now. My contract is to teach you, and your contract is to learn, to get credits. I also am doing this to make a living, and you are also doing this to get a degree. So there are often multiple motivations, but we are using one another to do so. You're using my expertise, and I am using your desire to learn and to get a degree. But the thing is we're not using each other as mere means because we have consented. We both know all of the relevant information, and both of our goals are being respected. We're free to choose our own goals, whether it's being wealthy or a good student or a moral person or whatever. A painter, you want to be a painter, you want to make music, you want to have a lot of friends. These are all goals that you are free to choose with your human freedom, and I have to respect that you get to choose your own goals in life, just like I want you to respect my goals in life. Thus, we can never treat each other as just a way to get to our own goals. Maybe if we think about when this is violated, we can understand what it means to use someone as a mere means. Now, if you lend me $20 and you say, do you promise to give this back to me? And I say yes, but I fully intend inside my head to never give it back to you. I am using you as a mere means to an end. I'm lying to you. I'm giving you a false promise. I'm not giving you all the information that you need to get to your goals. I am corrupting the information, making it even harder for you to use your freedom to get your own goals. Just so my way to my goals is easier. When we have a real promise of a contract that I fully intend to honor, everybody has all the information and we're both getting our own goals. This can be tough when motivations and goals conflict. All of these have their positives and their negatives. This isn't a class on ethics and morality just by itself, so we don't have too much time to go deep into it. So we just really kind of need the basic definitions. We'll move on to sort of what's presented oftentimes as the opposite to deontology, utilitarianism. Now, if deontology doesn't care about consequences and only cares about motivations inside your head and your heart, utilitarianism can't care about any of that and can only care about consequences. We want, as utilitarians, to have the most happiness or utility, to try and take values out of it, because people define happiness differently. They don't like it when they first hear it. For the most people. On the flip side, the least amount of suffering or disutility for the most people. The greatest good. So minimize suffering, maximize happiness or utility. And this is classically demonstrated with something you may have heard of, the trolley problem. I want you to imagine that you are standing on the top of a very large hill. Below you, there is a train barreling down on a track. In front of them is a Y junction, meaning the train could just go straight, or it could turn left onto another track that is attached to it. If it continues going straight, it will hit 5 construction workers. They have the big earmuffs on so their hearing doesn't get damaged. They're using machinery. They're not going to see the train. They're turned away from it. 5 of them. On the left-hand side, there is 1 worker. And now you look down and you see that there's a switch in front of you. You're too far away, you don't have enough time to do anything else, but if you pull that lever, the train will switch to the left-hand track and kill 1 person instead of 5. Most people with this scenario say that they would pull the lever because it's better for only 1 person to die and lose their life than it is for 5 people to lose their life. Oftentimes there's a smaller but still substantial minority when people are polled with this, and they've been polled with it a lot, that say they wouldn't do anything because the second they take an action, they're morally culpable or responsible for someone's death. And that means that you lean more toward deontology, the motives, your actions, versus if you would immediately pull the lever, or that's your thought, you're closer to utilitarianism. The consequences matter to decide whether something is right or wrong. There's lots of problems with straight utilitarianism. It can't care about human rights. We can violate that one person's human rights to stay alive, to not be killed, in order to protect those 5 other people. And that doesn't seem right because everybody has the right to not be killed. We can even reframe it to make it a little bit clearer. You could say that you would imagine you're an ER doctor and you have 5 patients that need organ transplants or they're going to die in the next couple of days. They're way down on the list of the transplant list, but a healthy young person comes in to donate blood. Turns out, magically, this healthy young person is a match for all 5 of them. And following the exact same logic as the trolley problem, if you were a utilitarian, you would say you should kill the 1 healthy young person and deposit their organs into the 5 people who need it, assuming that they're all going to make it and not going to be rejection, because that's 5 lives again instead of 1 life. We can't protect that person's right to stay alive. So we get other ethical theories of rights. Natural rights is an example of a more historical way of looking at things. We get it in the Bath, John Locke, who was writing in the late 1600s, early 1700s, saying that every human being has natural right to their own body and your own labor. He actually says God owns it, but a more modern view on it is you own it. So, when that happens, you have the negative rights to be left alone. Also, you have the positive rights to own whatever it is you mix with your own labor. So everybody has a communal right to the resources of the world, but when you go out and you plant a tree and then you harvest from that tree, you did the work, and that tree and its fruits are yours. Now, in philosophy textbooks and modern political textbooks, we get differentiated between negative and positive rights. This is going to come up a lot in this semester as well. Negative rights are the right to be left alone. And this is the entire Bill of Rights, all 10 of them, saying that the government cannot interfere with your right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness and property. So happiness that they mean in there is choosing your own goals. I might want to be wealthy, you might want to be artistic, you might want to publish books, you might want a big family, but we all should be free or have the liberty to choose what makes us happy. The government should not interfere. If I want to speak on something, they can't tell me no. If I want to be able to freely move from state to state, they shouldn't be able to stop me. There's also positive rights. In which you need some kind of infrastructure to lay a claim on some other segment of society. And I'm actually happy to talk about this because I don't think she was necessarily clear enough on how important and valuable positive rights can be in modern society. One positive right that might be invisible to us because it's universal is access to the telephone network. This is actually codified into federal law that everyone must have access to the telephone network. You might think, why? For justice and equality, would that be the case? To access the emergency services network. So to be able to call 911 and get fire, police, etc. There are certain baselines that you need to be able to formulate and pursue your own goals, to be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. If in the current era you didn't have access to education, healthcare, good infrastructure like sewers, or bridges, or roads to drive to work or to school, the telephone network, you would not be able to compete. You would not be able to get to the standard of living that is possible. But these things require a whole set of positive infrastructure for them to be in place. Given that they exist, however, people argue that we have a positive right to them. Some people currently argue that healthcare is a human right and that housing is a human right. Even though these might be a moral decision, they are not codified legally into our ethical systems. Oh, looks like this ran off the page, so let's take these off and talk about these last two. Contributing to society. Now, all of those ones we looked at are very individualistic. They start with the individual decision-making process. There are a lot of people who think, hey, we're born into a world that already has a whole lot of stuff going on, and all that stuff affects who we are and our opportunities in life. So it's a fact of the matter that we are given identity labels. Now, we can argue the theory behind it as much as we want, and we should. But it's incontrovertible that people label us. They label our skin color, they label our nationality, our religion, our sex, our gender, our sexual orientation, sometimes even our region, our class, our socioeconomic class. And these things, even if we want to rebel against them, become part of who we are. Because they were there before we were born, and we were slotted into baskets as we were born, and we learned from the world, from our peers, from our families, about them and how they relate to us. The legal and social infrastructure of the world is not equal. It provides different opportunities for different segments of the population. So this already existing society, we can say, maybe isn't just made up of a billion or a trillion individual decisions, but it's a thing in its own right that we have to take care of. Because if nobody takes responsibility for the entirety of the whole community doesn't get better. It's just a product of all these little individual decisions, none of which are thinking about the community as a whole. And if we make a better society, everyone will benefit. The idea goes, so that's how we should think first. Not that we shouldn't think about individuals, but we should think about the whole to benefit individuals eventually. Finally, social contracts with political justice, or what's known as egalitarianism, equality of opportunity, like a level playing field. Thomas Hobbes was an early modern philosopher, the 1500s, if I recall correctly, and he popularized this idea, wherein every rational human being enters into a social contract with the government. Why? Well, if there was no government, everybody would be out for themselves. There'd be war of all against all. You'd be able to cheat, steal, and lie. You would be able to kill. You do it whatever you want to make sure your life is going the way you choose. Or even if you didn't, there would be other people who chose to do so and could take away your hard work at any time. Because even though we have differing abilities of strength and intelligence and other human attributes, they're not that different. The difference between the smartest person and the least smart person isn't that big when it comes to the idea of competition for resources. Because eventually you have to sleep. Eventually you could convince some other people to band together with you and take someone else's stuff. Without the government to protect personal property and safety, Hobbes thought, we would always be in this state of war. So rational people recognize this, give up some of their freedoms, namely to hurt other people, to take what they want, and give that power to the government. They're the only ones that can use violence for war or for imprisonment in exchange for stability and safety. And this is the root of the social contract. We need government for the long term. There are lots of problems with this, just like all the rest of them, and it has been developed into the egalitarian system in the last 100 years or so, notably by John Rawls, who thought of justice as fairness, where we should all have rights, but we should also be able to be rewarded for our hard work and our motivation, but only up to a point. Inequality only works if it benefits everyone. So there's a bunch of different viewpoints about ethics that I'd like you to think about when we talk about these specific issues. And one question that I might ask, or a topic that I might throw out there as a possible topic, especially for your second essay, would be, how can we apply some of these ethical theories to whatever particular issue it is that you're thinking about or writing about. And that again took way longer than I thought it would. So I'm going to close down part 2 and move on to part 3, in which we finally tackle chapters 4 and 5, the readings for the first part of week 2.